Also is Yom HaKippurim Perek Beis Halacha Beis. Call Ace the entire time. Sheishana Abgodim. He changes his clothing. The Yiv Shoit Abgodim, and he takes off clothing. V'loivish Abgodim, and he puts other garments acherim after them. Torn tefillah. He needs to go to the mikveh. Let's take a look down below. Here's the Peirush. Since there are certain parts of the day that are done with the golden garments, and sometimes they're done with the white garments. Therefore, we have to change garments. Each time he changes from one to the others, meaning from beggars, from whatever garment he changes to, he has to go to the mikveh. Shenema, because it says, Aaron will come to El Moed of Poshat is big day about. He will take off the white garments which he wore when he went into Kodesh, into the Holy of Holies, and he shall leave them there. And the next pasuk says, he will then wash his body, meaning going into the mikveh in water, which encompasses the entire person. B'mokim Kodesh, in a holy place, that means in the environs of the Azorah, and there he puts on his garments. So you see that when he takes off and he puts on other garments, he has to go to the mikveh. 5 times in the mikveh, and 10 times he has to wash his hands and feet. The Kohen used to wash his hands and feet. The Kohen Gadol goes into the mikveh, and he sanctifies himself 10 times with the washing of his hands and feet. Ketzah. Let's see how it starts. The very beginning, before you can't wear clothing that's kodesh unless you're doing the service, and therefore he comes to the Beis Hamikdash in regular garments. He takes off his weekday garments, or the garments he doesn't wear when he's doing the avodah, she'olav, which are on him, the toivel. He goes into the mikveh oile, and he comes out of the mikveh mistapog, and he dries himself. And then he also washes his hands and feet. The Mishnah Melech says that in the Mishnah, the Rambam, it says mistapog, that he dries himself. That after he washes, goes into the mikveh, he has to become dry. And the question Mishnah Melech questions is it's an obligation, but that's the way usually you do it. You dry yourself. The Rambam would seem that it's an obligation. What's the logic behind it? Because the halacha is that there's nothing supposed to separate the garments from the body. Even one hair or a piece of dirt that's stuck to the garment or to his body will separate between him, his physical flesh, and the garment, and therefore the service would not be valid. And we have to be fearful. Maybe after he went to the mikveh, something from the water remained on his body. Therefore, he has to dry himself. There's nothing separating him. In addition to this, the water themselves would be a separation. As we find in Hilchos Yom HaKippurim, Perek Yud Halacha Zayin, that you have to be careful that the wind should not even separate between him and the garments. This was, in a sense, hard for us to comprehend how it could, what parts of the body it had to be attached to. And if air comes in between, let's say it blows between him and the garment the way it's worn, then it's not considered a garment, and certainly so if water separates. Therefore, the Rambam says he has to dry himself from the water. After he has immersed himself and he's dried himself, he puts on the golden garments. This is the first garments he does the avodah, the service on Yom Kippur, the regular service of the korbanos that are brought throughout the year. And then after he has put on the garments, he washes his hands and feet. And this is the first time he's washing, the first time he went to the mikveh. So we're 1 and 1 right now. Shiur is at Tom, and he sold as the Tomit, the offering of the morning. And he also brings the incense. We're talking not about the incense of Yom Kippur, which is in the Holy of Holies, but rather the one that's brought in the golden mizbeach inside. And then he cleanses the candelabra, and umaktir. Then he goes back out and he puts the limbs of the Talmud, which was slaughtered, and it was divided into different sections. Ima chavitin, together with the the meal offering, vanesochem, libations, umakriv hapar, and he also brings the bull, the shiva, kvosim shel musaf hayoim. According to the Rambam, in the very first beginning of the day, before he's worn the white garments, he has already brought the musaf, the additional offerings of the day, which is 1 par and 7 kvosim. And after that, he sanctifies his hands and his feet again. So that's the second time. And now he takes off the golden garments. The toivel, now he immerses himself. The oila, he emerges. Mistapok, he dries himself. And he wears the white garments. Now he washes his hands for the third time. So we have twice in the mikveh and 3 times of washing the hands and feet. Then he does those services that have to be done in the white clothing, as we'll learn. What is they? Every confession that he does on the bull and on the scapegoat and on the and on the scapegoat. And he also does the lotteries in the white garments. And the spraying of the dam from the bull and the soya, and meaning bifnim in Kodesh HaKadoshim, between the bowls of the Aron HaKodesh, and also on the curtain and on the golden altar. And the bringing of the incense b'Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Holy of Holies. This is a special haktorah, special incense, which is only done in Yom Kippur, and it's only done in white garments. Then he gives over the scapegoat to the person who's going to bring it to the La'azozel. There was a special person who was so set aside Erev Yom Kippur, on the eve of Yom Kippur, that takes the soya and he brings it to Azozel in the midbar. And we wait till it gets there during the day, as we'll see in the service. He takes out the innards of the bull that was slaughtered to atone for his sins, and the soya that was slaughtered for the blood to be brought inside, and they are they are then burnt, the bull and the soya, but the umoisa sha'aron the rest of the bull is burned completely, whereas the innards are placed on the mizbeach. They're placed afterwards, as we'll see when he has the golden garments. And then he again washes his hands. So this is the 4th time, and he takes off the white garments. When he goes to the mikveh, this is the 3rd time in the mikveh. We're up to 4 and 3, and he comes out, and he dries himself. And he puts on big zov, again golden garments. So So now we are up to the 5th time of Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim, and 3 times going to the mikveh. And then then he brings, after the soya chata shel musaf hayoim, that then he brings the part of the musaf, which is the goat for achatos, which is not the par or the kvosim, which are la'oila, which are burnt offerings. The eloi, and he also brings the ram, the el ha'om, which is unique to Yom Kippur, which doesn't have to do with the musaf, and one is his, the Kohen Gadol's, and one is the people's. The haim oilas, and both rams are burnt offerings. And he does all this with the golden garments. And what he had removed from the par v'soya in his white garments, he now brings on the Mizbeach with his golden garments, and although they have to be brought on the Mizbeach, even though the entire animal, other than the innards, are burnt outside of the Migdosh. Umakriv Tomash Ben Arboim, and then he's still in the golden garments, and it's afternoon. He brings the Tomash Ben Arboim, and then he washes his hands, and now we are up to the sixth time washing his hands. He takes off his golden garments, and before he always does it before. This is now the sixth. The Toivel, and he goes to the mikveh for the fourth time. And he merges. Mistapog, and he dries himself. Loivish big day lovon, and he puts on white garments. And he washes his hands and feet again for the seventh time. Now he again has white clothing, and he goes into the Holy of Holies. He takes out the vessel with which he brought the incense, which is called a kav, and the fire pan, which he had left there after he had placed the contents, the incense of the kav, into the fire pan. And he went in to take them out. Then he sanctifies his hands and his feet again. This is after he's left the Holy of Holies and he's outside. And he takes off the white clothing. And this is the seventh time. And he now immerses himself for the fifth time. And he emerges and he dries himself. The loivish bigdei zohov, puts on the golden garments again, and this is the ninth time that he washes his hands and feet. And he brings the incense of the afternoon, shel kol yom, which is brought every day. And he lights the candles. According to the Rambam, they were lit twice a day, in the morning and in the afternoon, and therefore you would have to clean it and make it fresh in the afternoon. And he would again wash his hands and feet. This is the 10th time before he takes off the golden garments. He takes off the golden garments, and he puts on his weekday garments, and he goes out. Now, Now, here the Ravid disagrees. This is the language of the Mishnah, but it was not, according to the Ravid, as I said earlier, the Rambam holds that twice a day you lit the candles. The Ravid is of the opinion that in Aboyim only the western nair was done, because that burned all day. In other words, when the Kohen Gadol came in the morning to prepare everything for the night, the western Ner Maravi, which is a question of which is the western one, whether it's the second one. If the candelabra was facing from east to west, it's the second one from after you come in from the east, and if it's facing from north to south, it would be the middle one. And that would remain burning all day. Even that was one of the miracles of the Beis Hamikdash. But the Rambam writes that he does both. That he would seem to be doing it twice a day. So the Ravid disagrees, and he says, even though that would seem to be the language of the Mishnah in 70a, and he goes and fixes the candles, but the Mishnah is only, according to the Ravid, coming to tell you, for the candle, which is called the western candle, which remained lit till at night, and therefore you would have to do it in the evening. But the other ones were all ready. And as we said in the beginning of the halacha, that you do the neighbors. Because the Mishnah explains, the Rambam is the opinion that you do doing the candles is not only for at night, but you also have to light it. And therefore the Rambam says you have to, if you lit in the morning, then you have to do it again in the afternoon, a fresh lighting. And according to the Rambam, the intent of the Mishnah, is simply understood that he has to again prepare it and light it again, just like he did in the morning. The Griz of Brisk, the Briskerov says, if the ayil, it's a question whether the ram which comes from Tzibur, that's mentioned in Parshas Achrei Moshe and Parshas Pinchas, are they considered one of the Musafim of Yom Kippur, or they're part of the order of Yom Kippur itself? In other words, is it a regular Musaf like you have on every festival, or is it part of the ram of Pinchas? Usually deals with the extra Musaf korbanos, and there it's mentioned. Are they one and the same or not? From one side, the Rambam writes that in addition to the Musaf, he brings the ayil haba mishel tzibur, which seems to be a ram which comes from the people, which is mentioned Achrei Moshe, and that's the ayil which is mentioned in Pinchas. So therefore, it would seem it's one of the Musafim. Helstrina Musafim, he writes, in Yom Kippurim, you would, in addition, bring a par of ayil. So it seems that was part of the Musafim. However, here the Rambam says, "Umakriv soya achatas shel musaf hayoyim." He only mentions that the chatas is of the musaf, the eloi ve'elo om, which would seem to be just like the Kohen Gadol can't go into the Beis Hamikdash without a bull and a ram. So too, the people need a ram, and they need the scapegoat and the soya that goes inside. So therefore, he made a differentiation between the soya, the goat of chatos, to the ayil. That means it would seem that it's not part of the musaf offering. Also, we'll see the Rambam writes in Perek Daled, in the 4th chapter, and he does the soya which is done outside, which is musaf, and he brings eloi ve'ela om, and he doesn't include them as part of musaf, either of them. So, and therefore, it would seem again that it's not part of the musafim. Therefore, the Brisker wants to say that in contradiction to the other musafim, that only have a din of korban musaf, the Ela Om, according to the Rambam, has 2 dinim. Has a din of more korban musaf because it's mentioned in Pinchas, and it has a din of the Seder Avodas Hayoim. And he brings proof to this from Rashi in Yuma 60a. The Gemara explains the Brisa. The Chacham learned all the actions of Yom Kippurim which are mentioned have to be done on the order, and if you did one before the other, it's not valid. Nehemiah says, when is this so? With things that are done with the white garments, whether inside or outside. But those things which are done with gold garments outside, whatever he did is done, even if it's not according to the order, because that's just a normal service of the whole day. Rashi writes, he going Eloi ve'elo om, and here he's talking about Rashi's writing about those things which are done for Yom Kippur, and he refers to the ram and the Kohen's ram. Now, the Kohen's ram is definitely only a Yom Kippur item that he took out, taking out the incense cup and the fire pan, and if he did the aisle in the wrong place, it would not cause it to be possible if he did the aisle earlier. So we see that Rashi considers the Ela Am as part of Yom Kippur, which is in Seder Hayoim. Thus, even though Rashi considers the Ela Am part of the action of Yom Kippur, but still, if he didn't do it according to the order, it doesn't affect anything, because it doesn't say by these items which are done in the golden garments chukah. Chukah is only said on those things which are done with the white garments. That's the only thing where it says chukah, and not by the Eloi ve'elo om, which are done with the golden garments. And therefore, this we see that Ela Am, even though it's part of Yom Kippur according to Rashi, still it's not. It doesn't affect the order. The order doesn't affect it, and it could be that he would do it even before taking out the kaf machta, even though it is from the musafim. But the soya musaf, which is done outside, even though it has to be after the inside service even though it has to be brought after you've done the work of the avodas hayom. You can't bring it before he's brought the blood into the Beis Hamikdash, as we find in Yuma 70a and Parshas Pinchas. The wording is very clear. The Seir Izim has to be brought as a chatos, besides the chatos of the Kippurim, which was already brought. To tell you that Soya Musafim, this soya has to be brought after you brought the blood inside. So even though it is not a Yom Kippur offering, it's a Musaf offering, here's one item that is part of the order of Yom Kippur, and therefore it's outside the rule of the other items. So basically, what has to be done in Yom Kippur has to be done in order. What's done on Musafim for all year doesn't have to be done in a special order. However, the soya of Musaf has to be done, even though it's Musaf, has to be done in the order. And the ayil, which is of Yom Kippur, since it's done with the golden garments, it's included. It doesn't have to go into any order because it's not mentioned in the posuk in the order of which it has to be done.